Forward. Martha Gellhorn was my stepmother. She married my father after she divorced Ernest Hemingway. Martha used to tell me that her inspiration for writing a letter was a heartfelt complaint. That was her dynamo. And when she started to write it, she wrote it to someone, person to person. That way she could focus her complaint in a more direct way that didn't have a scattergun effect and dissipate the emotion in her letters. She always claimed not to be an intellectual, but there was a contradiction in her here because she loved ideas. She was also very much against what she called naval inspection, and yet her heartfelt letters often included an analysis of a relationship or the person she was writing to. Martha and I started off on the left foot. I had been airlifted from my very comfortable, seemingly successful life in Princeton, living with an aunt, to an exciting gray post-war London, where I didn't seem to fit very well. But then we had a geneticist who came to visit us at our school in Devon, and he said that we will go to a party in maybe 35 years and not know who is man-made and who isn't. The thought horrified me, and I wrote to Martha about it. Instead of saying, "Get on with your studies," she wrote right back and said, "Yes, isn't it terrible?" I replied that as far as I could see, we were living like one-eyed cyclops and Hollywood was the opiate of the masses. And in the meantime, the wool was being pulled over our eyes by a few scientists who were taking the responsibility for the future. And how dare they, and how could they, and so on and so forth. And Martha wrote right back fulsomely and with growing concern. We then cemented our friendship on anti-nuclear campaigning. She, with her magnificent book, The Face of War, which in my view is the best thing she ever wrote. I went on anti-nuclear marches, which she supported avidly. This is how we became pen pals and created our friendship through letters. Her letters delved deeper into her, I think, in some ways better than her presence. She nearly always had a party face and made the best of whatever company she was in, and that served to hide away the true Martha. Only in her letters did her feelings emerge, and with gusto. She opened her heart to you, and it was a great compliment and privilege and treat to be in on such a display. It presaged affection and trust, and they were an education. I probably got more out of Martha's letters than I did out of my schooling. Janet Somerville has painstakingly put together a rich collection of Martha's letters for you, the listener, to enjoy. And then there are the replies from her friends, people who helped shape the 1930s and the 1940s. What you are getting in this book is a very articulate account of those fascinating times, not just the history, but the feelings, thoughts, and aspirations of those who shaped the history of the time. Janet Somerville has done a wonderful job. I invite you to enjoy the fruits of her labor of love. Sandy Matthews, Devon, England. 1. Nothing ever happens. I think one can only afford to be poor alone. Poor à deux is a disaster. Martha Gellhorn. Much to the chagrin of her progressive parents, in 1929, Gellhorn left Bryn Mawr after her junior year, only 1 year shy of her degree. She would later say of her parents, they didn't do any instructing, they just lived and were. Her mother, Edna, was a suffragette and a founder of the National League of Women Voters. She had a great sense of civic duty and what things should be made better. Her father, George, was a doctor, half of whose work was charity work, a man who cared a great deal more about his poor patients. She grew up watching two extremely generous, talented, and charming people live their lives with a moral code grounded in social justice. Her co-ed days behind her, Gellhorn got work first as a fact-checker at the New Republic in New York City. There she wrote a profile of heartthrob Rudy Valley, published in August, observing that his shy, I can't imagine why I'm here pose is tiring. She almost decided to return home to St. Louis because the New York City skyline plunged her into despair.